CMJ's Epic Quest. CMJ's Epic Quest. CMJ's Epic Quest.
Hey everybody, welcome back to D&J's Epic Quest. My name is Jay Rule, and joining alongside me here is...
Derek Cronus. Man, it feels good to be back.
It does feel good to be back.
It's been a little kind of wonky lately here, but we've both had issues going on outside of this, so...
Yeah.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. I guess, how you been?
Pretty good. I mean, I guess all things considering, we had a funeral last week, or on Saturday. Pretty sad deal. I got a new car. Not new, but new to me. And just been working and trying to do some reading when I can. So that's about it. Yeah. How about you?
Same old, all things considered. Not too much to report upon, I guess. I guess that being said, before we get started in today's episode, we'd like to take a moment to thank and recognize Silverstone's Books. Check out their website at silverstonesbooks.com, where they have a large selection of fantasy, sci-fi, and horror books, with the option of many signed copies at pretty decent prices. The store carries a large number of indie authors, so help us help them in supporting those self-published authors. Also, they've been gracious enough to give us a promo code for 10% off your next order. That code is DJ Quest, so check out their site and pick up a book and save a little cash while supporting some authors.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, I don't know what you got going on this weekend. Maybe it would work out to go down there. I know it's kind of throwing you on the spot right now, but...
Well, I know my youngest has a birthday party to go to.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about this earlier today because my wife's going to be gone basically all weekend at a bachelorette party. So, yeah, I was just thinking about that. I didn't know if it would work out. I don't really want to go down there without you. So.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I'll have to talk with the lady and see what works out.
Cool. Yeah, let me know. I imagine that this episode, I don't know if it'll come out by the time they're done with this, but I think at the end of this month, maybe it will. McCavin is donating a portion of his sales this month to, is it the Trevor Project? Is that I'm going to sound like an asshole, but that's like the, I guess, fundraiser. I don't know if that's like the right word, but program for like at-risk LGBTQ youth or something along those lines. I don't know how that works, if there's just chapters like locally and stuff like that, or if it's just like a national thing. But last year, I think he said he donated $250 and he's hoping to double that. So
okay.
Now's as good a time as ever to pick up a book from them. And yeah, use our code. I'm pretty sure only like one person's used that code besides me. And that was Mick in Australia. So come on, somebody use it. Somebody, let us know what you got. And I'm always happy to shout out on here if you let me know. I've also tried to get a hashtag going for Kevin. I don't know if you've seen it on Twitter, but Shop Silverstones. I've thrown around, like, if he's posted something, I've retweeted it using that. So
okay.
It was just kind of one of those things that it just popped in my head at the time, and hopefully it catches on.
Hell yeah. That sounds great, man.
I wanted to do one thing a little different here before I read the patrons here, or we can do it after. I'll do it after. But our patrons, we have Jan the Picker, Luciana Etrigan, Ryan the Topological, Damien the Rock of Faces, Nate Fiddle Me This, Shield Anvil Dylan, Calvin He Who Witnessed, Livia the Malazan Potato, and Aaron Mott Irregular. God damn, it feels good to say your guys' names again. I know we did it when we recorded with HC, and it felt good then, but it just hits a little bit different with Malazan content.
I would agree. Yeah. Thank you all for your continued patronage. We really appreciate it.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, I know you've still got, I think as long as it's an option, we're going to have that week free trial there. So if you're on the fence, jump on with that. No harm, no foul otherwise. But yeah, I told you I want to do something a little bit different here. I'm stealing this from Fantasy for the Ages podcast. Justin, besides Malazan, what else are you reading right now?
Currently I'm wrapping up. I think I have 3 books left of the Redwall series.
Nice. Which one are you on?
I am on what is called, I don't even know how to say the word right, but Alleluia.
Eulalia or whatever. That's how I always read it in my head.
Yeah, Eulalia. But yeah, I planned on having a little episode where I rank all the Redwall books and provide like a very brief summary. So I'm looking forward to ripping that up. So hopefully, I don't know, in the next couple of months, that should be ready to go.
Nice. That would be fun. I hope I would be with you for that. Hopefully.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I can't do this solo.
You could.
Yeah, but I don't want to.
That's it? Just Redwall besides Malazan?
Now that Curse of the Fallen is done, I know I picked up a few books that I've thrown on my TBR, and the ones
what'd you get?
The ones that keep calling me is a book called God Killer, and then there's another book, Priory of the Orange Tree, The Ruin of Kings. Those are kind of the 3 that keep calling my name. So I think that like once I wrap up the Redwall series, I am going to be delving into one of those.
Interesting. I don't know. I think who's God Killer written by?
I don't remember.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I remember reading the back and I'm like, ooh, this looks really good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I'm reading 2 other books currently. I am about a third of the way through the 3rd book of the Rage War trilogy, which is like a Aliens versus Predators book. All the books have been really good, and I've interacted with the author Tim Levin on Twitter a little bit, but he's got things set up where I can't message him on Twitter unless I'm verified, which I have thought about doing, but I haven't pulled the trigger on that yet. But I did tweet at him asking if he would be interested in chatting once I finish the 3rd book, and he never responded, so I don't know if that's going to happen or not. And then I've started The Traitors We Are by Mike Roberti. I know he will be willing to talk once I finish that. I'm only like 2 chapters in, but it's pretty interesting. I was also thinking maybe once I finish that book, Justin, maybe we could do like a short little episode where I kind of pitch it to you and see if it's something might be up your alley.
Yeah.
But I've picked up some books. I've picked up some books lately too. Probably too many of them, and I usually post them on. Usually post them on Twitter. But I've got. Well, I'm waiting on the 1st book. I got the 2nd and 3rd book, but the 1st one got lost in the mail, so they're resending it to me. But it is the Hanged God trilogy, which is written by, I don't know how to say her name, but she is Norwegian also. It's like a Viking fantasy thing. And I asked Jan if he's read it, and he hasn't, but he checked it out. But Thildy Cold Holt, the 1st book's called Northern Wrath, which that's the one I'm waiting on. And then the 2nd book is called Shackled Fates, and the 3rd one is Slaughtered Gods. And then I've got Dragon Mage by M.L. Spencer, The Last Ranger by J.D.L. Roselle, and the last one I got, I think, was The Bloodstones, which is by Tori Tekken, who is also from Minnesota. I'm not sure where she lives in state, but she is local to us. And then I did pick up Forge of the High Mage. I don't have the other books, but I got that from Silverstones.
Gotcha. So, is it the trade paperback or is it the hardcover?
It's the trade paperback, like the bigger one, which I don't know I don't know if that one's been released in trade paperback, but I don't really care, I guess.
That's fair. Now that they got rid of the mass market paperback type A, I don't know what I'm going to do because that's what all my other books are in.
Yeah, I just decided like, unless I win the lottery, I'm not going to like stress out about it that much. I don't really care.
Yeah, I don't even think they make that as a format. They just do the paperback B, which is like a little bit bigger than like type A, but a little bit smaller than trade paperback.
Gotcha. Yeah. So that's kind of what's been on my docket here. I think I got a couple Dragonlance books also that I've picked up along the way. I don't remember which ones because there's fucking like 300 of them. So
yeah. All right. Well, should we move on to chapter 17 here, Malazan's Memories of Ice.
Hell yeah, dude. Let's do it.
All right, well, the epigraph for this chapter, a little bit of a shorty, but what the soul can house, flesh cannot fathom, the Rath'Fener, Imaric, first destriant.
Yeah, I feel like it definitely fits. I mean, obviously, I think he means all of the epigraphs to fit the chapter, but I guess I feel the connection to it personally.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can totally see how it fits this chapter.
All right, well, we'll all get started here. I will say I only read this chapter twice, just initially, and then as I summarize things, and it's been a while, so if I have questions on things, events, that type of thing, you'll have to help me as best you can. Yeah, this was a pretty big chapter, so we'll get going here.
All right.
The matron's body gave off an oily substance that sank into Tok's clothing as he slipped between folds of the chain shamal. Large arms held him tight. It was dark in the cave, and whatever light he saw was born from his imagination. It could have been dreams or memories. He saw figures on the edge of his vision, some wearing masks, one looking like skin pulled over bone, and the other the definition of beauty. But he didn't believe any of them were real. He thought they were the faces of madness resting on his shoulders. When he slept, he dreamt he was a wolf hunting, not to eat, but to deliver something else. He didn't know what, but who he searched for wandered alone. But it always fled when it saw him or his siblings. However, they continued to chase as their quarry became more and more exhausted. They caught it on a mountaintop and surrounded it. When they closed in to deliver what was to be delivered, it vanished. There was surprise and despair as he and his kin had circled the spot where she had lain. They howled. Finally, Tok awoke back in the arms of the matron. Such was his life. Sleep, interrupted by moments of hallucination. She kept him alive, and when Tok would empty his bladder and bowels, she would hold him away and then lick him clean, taking the last shred of dignity he had left. Her embrace broke his bones, and the more he screamed, the tighter she held, so he suffered in silence. Soon, he was visited by a ghostly face disguised as an old man, but tusks formed in Tok's mind and yellow eyes that stared back at him. Though he was unable to recognize him any further, and the figure would speak to him. I don't know if I forgot to say would not speak to him, or if it would speak to him. Must be would speak to him, based on my next sentence here. They are trapped, my friend, all but the Tlan Imus, who fears solitude. Why else would he not leave his companions? Swallowed in ice, helpless, frozen. The Segula, no reason to fear them, never was. But I played. And the woman, my rimmed Buteus statue, wolf and dog have vanished, fled. I, the inn, brother of your eye, fled, tail between legs. Tee-hee! Your Malazan army is too late to save Capustan. The city is mine. Your fellow soldiers are still a week away, my friend. We shall await them. We shall greet them as we greet all enemies. I will bring you the head of the Malazan general. I will bring you his cooked flesh, and we shall dine together, you and I, once more. How much blood can one world shed? Have you ever wondered, Tok the Younger? Shall we see? Let us see, then, you and I. And dear mother here, oh, is that horror I see in your eyes? Some sanity still resides in her rotted brain, it seems. How unfortunate for her. Deceit. They are not mortal beasts. How dare they assail my defenses? Here, at the very gates. And now the Tlan Imus has vanished. I can find him nowhere. Does he come as well? So be it. They shall not find you. We journey, the three of us, north, far beyond their reach. I have prepared another nest for you two. The inconvenience. By this time, Tok was no longer listening. His mind had been snatched away. He saw pale white light glaring off ice-clad mountains and valleys buried in rivers of snow, condors wheeling in the sky, and smoke, wooden structures destroyed, broken stone walls, crimson smears, and people running everywhere. The point of view changed. To his side, a black and gray hound kept pace. Its shoulders were eye level, and it ripped apart armored figures. The beast was driving towards a second set of gates, an arched portal at the base. None could stand before it. None could stop it. Dust formed around the hound, and it had a rider with a sword the color of old, dried blood. Tok thought the rider's bones were well, but not the flesh, while his own flesh was well, but not the bones. Perhaps they were brothers. The hound and the rider were a nightmare vision. They hit the gates, and wood exploded while terror filled the seer domain. Tok rode his wolf's vision into the shadow of the breach, where he saw Kell hunters on either side of the hound and rider. The Kell raised their blades. Snarling, the wolf raced for the gate, everything a blur, while the Kell hunters tried to intercept. The wolf ducked the blade and leapt, gaining a mouthful of undead flesh. The wolf was removing the head of the hunter while it spasmed and shook one of its blades found the wolf's flesh. Tok and the wolf both flinched in pain, yet it did not relent in its attack. The head fell back and thumped on the ground. While the Kell hunter and the Talan Imus traded sword blows with the twin blades. I fucked that sentence up. With the twin blades of the Kell hunters, the speed was unimaginable. Chunks of the K'chain Shamal's flesh flew. One of its bladed arms fell over end. It fell, and the Imus climbed on top of it and finished it off. The wolf approached the wounded hound, and it snapped at it, warning to stay away. Suddenly, Tok was blind, ripped away from the wolf's vision, and now the matron held him tight. They were traveling in a warren, a path of ice. He realized they were fleeing Outlook, fleeing the fortress that had been breached. There was a shout for silence. The seer was with them, leading the way through Amtos Falak. Tok told the voice in his mind to shut up, and the entire warren shook, exploding in a conflagration of sorcery. In his mind, Tok thought, Lady Envy, with us once more. And the seer screamed. The matron crushed Tok tight, bones cracking, and he blacked out.
Such a beautiful way to come back into doing this, and just the having it be the opening section of the chapter was just absolutely awesome.
It definitely hit different the second time reading it, because I feel like I just didn't really remember much of it from the first time. So I'm like, oh man, like this is like brutal. It's kicking ass. Like it was a lot of fun to read again a second time.
Yeah, and it's crazy how, Erickson is essentially describing what's happening at Outlook, right? Where Tok met up with the Panian Seer, the assault by Tool, the Segula, Lady Envy, all of those guys are essentially attacking Outlook.
Yeah, that was kind of my first thought, like just since I couldn't remember, but I assumed it was Tool and Envy in the Segula. I think it's got to be right. Like, I think you're confirming that for me, so.
Yes. You are 100% correct there.
And then obviously, like, what the Talan Eye, or the, whatever his vision he was seeing from, they were chasing the Maibi. I think that makes plenty of sense. And obviously, like, I do remember that section from the previous chapter where she's, running, she's exhausted, she's on the mountaintop, and then she awakens she vanishes.
Yeah. It was kind of cool how that, like, tied that in. I was definitely not expecting that to take place, but it makes me feel like Tok definitely has something to do with the Talan Eye. And from what I remember from the section is that he is the leader of the Talan Eye in the dream here.
I felt that way too.
So
don't really have anything else to add besides that I agree with you.
yeah. It's cool to see the connection between Tok and the Maibi. And I can't help but wonder where it's going.
Yeah. I wonder what like this message was that they're trying to deliver, because obviously she thinks like, oh, they're trying to fucking kill me, and they're like, oh, we're chasing you, we got something to tell you, but right. She's like, oh, Jesus Christ, these are big scary wolves, like they want to eat me and shit, like I gotta run away from them. Like I get it, like it makes sense, but not like it's got me curious, and I hope we find out. Yeah,
chasing her like they're chasing someone to talk about their car's extended warranty. Yeah.
That must be it, yeah.
Yeah.
My next thought here, just where it talks how the matron like holds Tok out like a little baby while he pisses and poops, so he doesn't like defecate on her, was a really weird thing to like summarize. And I basically took that word for word because I didn't know how to change that. It just felt really weird. And then she would, lick him clean like, an animal would, which was also kind of gross. But I suppose that's what happens.
It is gross, but it makes me feel so bad for Tok. How do you get out of something like this? How do you get out of that situation? And to constantly have your bones break and then rehealed, it reminds me of Prometheus, right? All because he gave fire to humans in ancient Greek mythology, and now he just has to suffer endlessly.
Yeah.
I'm very curious to see how like the Maibi situation turns out. Tak as the Talan Eye, what message? Does he get saved? Does he do it himself? Like, there's just so many ways that this can go, and it makes me really excited to continue on.
I've got. Yeah, I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to leave you hanging.
Uh-oh. Why? What you got?
Nothing at all.
Hey.
Nothing.
Hey, no. Spill it.
It might relate to the spoiler that I think I maybe have seen.
Okay. All right. I'll give you that one.
That's all I'll say.
Okay. Well, I guess we can continue on with your comments on the section.
Oh, like he's visited by a ghostly face. Like, I imagine that must be one of these hallucinations. But then I think my next thought here is I was like, is this fucking like Fenner or who is it? But it must be the seer, right?
Correct. Yes. It is the seer kind of adding to the mental abuse and torment that Tak is experiencing physically. He's essentially just egging him on, filling his head with like negative thoughts, just trying to get inside of his head. But yeah, it's definitely the Panian seer.
So then, I mean, that leads into my next one here. So it's the matron Tak, and then obviously the seer. And at the time when I wrote this, I was like, I don't know what the fuck is going on anymore. But after, it's always weird how things just, at least for me, make a little bit more sense after you read things out loud.
Oh yeah,
and that's
sure.
Definitely one of the cool things about doing this is like, yeah, I can read it, and sometimes I don't understand things the first time through, or maybe even the second time through. But then talking it out just leads to, I don't know, it's just like a different brainwave, I guess.
Sure. Makes sense.
I think my last thought here for this section. So the fortress had been breached. So I did not remember making the connection that the vision Tak was seeing was at the same place he was already at. It was just basically the other point of view.
Right.
I definitely did not remember that the first time.
Well, it seems like what this what this section is trying to tell us is that Lady Envy, the Segula, and Tool, Baljag, and Garath have attacked Outlook, which is where we last saw Tak and his embrace with the matron. So because of that, he's seeing the attack through Baljag's eyes, or, experience, or whatever you want to, whatever link that is. And then we've got the seer kind of running in flight, right? Like him, Tak, and the matron are traveling through the Warren of Ice, Omatos Falak, to wherever they're going. So it was enough to cause him to panic a little bit, and even at the end here, Tak is just like, Tak told the voice in his mind to shut up, and the entire Warren shook. So I almost kind of wonder if he's got it like an equal say, but he just doesn't yet realize, or for whatever reason, Lady Envy is able to like Apple AirTag him and kind of know where he is at all times, type of thing. And yeah, I don't know. Another kind of mystery that I don't quite understand, but am looking for a resolution.
Right. Yeah, that was all the thoughts I had on that first section. I felt like that first section was longer than what it was, but I know it's always different when you're typing stuff out. I know one of my other sections later on is quite a bit longer. So
yeah, you definitely got a little screwed over on this chapter because you had all the long guys.
Yeah, that's all right though. I mean, I don't know. It's just the nature of the beast we've decided to create, and I don't know how to explain it. I enjoy it. It's still fun. It's work, but it doesn't really feel like work. But I also don't have to do the editing like you do. That maybe feels like more work.
That's fair. All right. Well, you ready to move on to the next section here?
Yeah, go for it, man.
All right. Haran saw the red glow in the southern sky that confirmed Capustan's defeat. That and Humbrol had sent scouts out, and those scouts had brought word back earlier that the siege had ended. Even though what Paran saw confirmed his expectations, it still didn't diminish the sadness of a dying city. Paran's thoughts moved to that of Humbrol's children, and he hoped that they fared better than the Grey Swords. Small pockets of resistance likely still existed, fighting street by street, home by home. Gnos thought to himself, if these Barghast could speed things up with their march, they could arrive to offer assistance to those small parties of resistance. Trotz approached, and Gnos turned to address his new captain. They conversed for a brief moment before Paran asked what Humbrol Tor had said about picking up the pace. Trotz explains that the Baran and the Ankrata clans would be moving southeast to take the landings and the floating barges. The Sanan and the Gilk will strike towards Capustan, and the remaining clans will seize the Septarch main supply camp, which sits between the city and the landings. Rand says that this was all well and good, but there are people dying and getting devoured in there. Trotz explains that the shouldermen are not worried as Tan and Kafal are safe, and the bones are being protected by a strange sorcery. Trotz grins and continues on to explain that he's been given leave to lead his clan at a pace of his own choosing. Trotz asks Paran if he was eager to be the first of the Whiteface clan in Capustan. Paran growled under his breath, a sudden urge to draw a sword, felt a need to deliver vengeance. There was more to his need for vengeance. He lived with pain, and that pain bound him tighter and tighter to himself. He thought to himself that this was one truth, however, but there was another, and that he was kept pushing her away. He wasn't ready for her, not with his stomach aflame. Gnos told Trotz to call up the Bridgeburners as they can be at the North Gate in an hour's time. Trotz asked if all of them were to accompany. Paran glanced over at Trotz and questioned whether the 37 of them and an unconscious mage were going to take Capustan on their own. Trotz, after a moment, said that they will leave Quick Ben behind, and that he means to try to take the city on their own. Paran grinned and said that he was glad to hear it. So a little bit of a short section, it's definitely establishing that the Whiteface clan and Paran and the Bridgeburners are now approaching Capustan. And it's just really cool how you can see like the red glow, above the city from all the fires that have been going on. And it was a very visionary section. But I guess two things that I had kind of thoughts on is the strange sorcery, which I'm assuming is what is the Thrall. I'm wondering if that ever kind of gets explained a little bit. Like, I have a feeling it's the Barghast Warren. At the same time, I don't really know yet. I feel like the only reason it's the Barghast is that I feel like it would be, if it was anything else, it would be infected by the crippled god and thus not protective, if that makes sense.
I think I would tend to agree with you that it must be the Barghast like magic. I mean, because it's around the Thrall. That's where the bones are at.
Right.
I don't know what else would make any sense.
Right. Yeah. I guess I'm unsure as to what exactly that entails, but it's a mystery to me. I understand it for what it is, but I would like some answers. So hopefully eventually that comes.
Yeah, I don't know if I feel like that could go either way, honestly.
How so?
Well, I mean, maybe we're just told that it's the Barghast. I guess if they were just like, oh, yep, it was our magic protecting the Thrall. Like, would that be satisfactory for you? Or do you want more of an explanation than that?
I mean, honestly, anything at this point will work.
Gotcha. I feel like maybe that's what we'll get, but I don't know if it'll be much more than that.
I guess at the end of the day, I just want to know whose it is.
Sure.
The other thing that I had is, and I know the Torques aren't mentioned quite yet at this point, but having read the chapter a couple of times now, this really seems to stick out to me, where Paran is saying that he's lived with the pain, and that pain bound him tighter and tighter to himself. And it kind of resembles what happens with the Torques on Picker's arms as she gets closer and closer to Treach or Gruntle, so to speak. And I just wonder if that is supposed to be some type of connection or similarity.
I don't know.
Like he's getting closer and closer to what he's supposed to be doing, which I think kind of happens in this chapter. It's not really like explicitly said, but based on some things that happen later, I think I think that this is kind of what it was referring to or foreshadowing to.
I definitely, I know, like when the Torques do get mentioned in this chapter, I felt like it was a proximity alert.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's something similar.
But, kind of going off of that, like he has this thought to himself that there was kind of like another reason for vengeance, right? And that was just that he kept pushing her away, which I feel like is referring to Silver Fox. And I think that at this moment in time, Paran believes that this pain will go away or subside and he'll kind of go back to normal, but only after he delivered this pain and violence that was trapped within him, only will like the pressure subside. So I think like at this point in time, he thinks that like he has to be violent to get it out, if that makes any sense. And I don't know, I see why it's a little bit delusional, because this is why he states earlier that he felt a need to deliver vengeance, because he thinks that this would be the best way to like quote unquote let his violence out. But I'm not sure if that's exactly how that works. It seems that this pain is a responsibility that he's not aware of, but he hasn't taken accountability for yet, which I'm assuming is the master of the deck stuff.
Gotcha. I guess building off of Paran, I've kind of had a thought here that just kind of popped into my head. So what it says that he felt the need or the want, I can't remember exactly how it was worded, the urge to draw his sword. Did he draw it?
I don't think he did.
He just felt like he wanted to. So I know like in maybe earlier in this book, or maybe it was in Gardens, but I know, what's his sword's name?
Chance.
Luck or something? Chance. I'm wondering like, is he going to get through? I don't know if he'll make it to the end of the series or not, but like, will he make it however far he makes it without actually having to use his sword?
That would be really, really interesting if that was the case. I never thought of that.
Yeah, it just popped into my head too, just when this urge to draw a sword, because I know it has been mentioned that he's like, oh, I haven't had a chance to use my sword yet, or something along those lines. And now I'm just kind of wondering, like, what if he doesn't actually?
That would be very interesting. So I guess we'll definitely have to keep reading to find that one out. But
for sure. But yeah, like I said, just popped into my head here.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting that the whole like getting tighter and tighter thing, his pain is getting tighter and tighter, and then Picker's torques kind of get tighter and tighter as we'll like read on. What we know about Gruntle is, I mean, I don't think it's any secret at this point, but is that he is Treach Reborn or Treach's Mortal Sword or whatever the case is, which is animalistic, right? But Paran was also bit by, or I mean, didn't get bit, but had some Hound of Shadow's blood spilled on him or whatever, landed in his mouth or whatever the case is. But that is also very animalistic too. So I'm wondering if there is a connection between like the beast side of things.
It could be.
But yeah, I mean, those were my only thoughts. I'm ready to move on if you are.
Sure. Yeah, those are some good thoughts. Good conversation there, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. The pace set by the white-faced Barghest was painfully slow. Surprise duels would bring the clan to a halt at least half a dozen times a day, though now their frequency was diminishing now that Humbrol Tower made a decision to assign entire clans to specific tasks for the upcoming battle. Trott's new role as war chief of the Bridgeburners was a slight relief to Paran. He hated having the responsibility of command. Being second in command had given him enough breathing room. Trotz even attended the War Council meetings, leaving Paran completely out of the picture. Officially, Paran was still in charge of the Bridgeburners, but they were now a tribe according to Tower. The tribe's elected war chiefs, and that job was Trotz. The Bridgeburners made their way towards the city silently as the rain had softened the ground. Paran was just behind Trotz, who still took the point position. Paran thought it wasn't a good spot for a leader, but it was appropriate for a war chief, though Paran still didn't like it. It showed how stubborn Trotz was. He thought a leader should be adaptable. Paran felt Silver Fox reach out to him, to link with him in his mind. This was the third time this week she had connected with him. He wondered if she could see what he saw, read his thoughts. Given what Pran knew, he instinctively had been pulling away from her. He didn't want her digging through his secrets, even if it was for tactical purposes. Suddenly ahead, Trots dropped into a crouch with one hand raised and gestured twice, and the soldier behind Pran joined Trots. They reached the Panion North picket line. The camp was a mess, no organization, and undermanned. The three men studied the camp for a few moments, then withdrew and huddled with the squad sergeants. Spindle spoke first, saying it appeared to be medium infantry, about 2 companies. Trots agreed, giving the number about 200, with more sick and wounded in the tents. Spindle figured mostly sick, probably dysentery. Everyone else must be in the city. Trots mentioned the gate beyond them. Pran said there was a shitload of dead bodies. Nancy said they got to get through the medium infantry and asked Spindle how he was on Moranth ammo. Spindle said they had plenty, but wished they had a lobber that Fiddler made. Pran thought Hedge had one, but was told it was broken, but they still had a plan. Pran muttered that he thought Spindle was a mage. He said he was, and also a sapper, a deadly combination. Trots told them to get on with it. Pran said they should be able to punch through the center, with the sharpers no problem, but those on the outside flanks would just fill in behind them. Spindle said they would sow cussers with a time delay. When he says run, he had better do that because if he's not 30 paces away when they blow, he's dead. They moved towards the enemy line and Pran felt Silver Fox again. He did his best to push her aside for now. He thought that if they fought, this would be the first time he actually used his sword. And there it is, what we were just talking about. The sappers had gone to ground and Pran no longer could see them. He looked back at the rest of the Bridgeburners and was about to speak to Picker when the detonations went off. Bodies flew. Trots yelled a war cry and the Bridgeburners rushed ahead. Pran heard the word run and thought he didn't have enough time to get to a safe distance. As he ran, his heart seized as he saw the pile of corpses ahead of him. They weren't dead. They were sleeping. Pran heard Hedge yell down as he and the other sappers threw cussers into the mass of Tenniscourie ahead of them. Pran hit the deck and the ground came up and knocked the air out of him. Bloody shreds of bodies rained down on him. When he opened his eyes, there was a pair of hips next to him. He could only stare. His ears were ringing, and a hand pulled him up. It was Mallet, who said they were getting the hood out of there and pushed him forward. Pran saw the destruction all around him, but failed to register in his head. He had begun to shut down, as he had years ago in Itko Khan. He saw figures fleeing all around him. The Bridgeburners had announced themselves to the enemy and thought to himself that they were the Panion's match in calculated brutality. However, this was a war of nerves that no one would win. The darkness of the gate swallowed Pran and his soldiers. They stopped, crouched, reloaded crossbows, and no one said a word. Trot said they would go into the city low and quiet. They would head to the Thrall. They could see that a slaughter had taken place here, and a feast as the street was littered ankle-deep in bones. From what Pran could see, roughly 2/3 of the bodies belonged to those who invaded the city. He spoke, saying the Panions paid dearly. Mallet trailed off, saying if they had only been here a day or two earlier. They carefully made their way towards the Thrall. Some buildings still stood, others did not, and everywhere they looked, there were bodies. Further down, there were fresh corpses that rose like a hill. Nobody said nothing as they approached the hill, as the truth in front of them was near impossible to comprehend. On this street alone, there must have been at least 10,000 dead bodies. To continue on this street, they would need to climb the hill of corpses. Trots did not hesitate at this. As they climbed, Pran focused on not looking down, thinking of only the defenders, the courage they had to fight on, yielding nothing and cut to pieces where they stood. Those soldiers humbled everyone, and a lesson for the Bridgeburners. They had come to a war without mercy. He thought this ramp had to have been made, but for what? It ended in a heap less than a man's height from the top of the building. Spindle said it was a siege ramp. They had wanted to get to somebody. A voice called out saying, "Us." Crossbows were at the ready in an instant. Pran looked up and saw a dozen figures on the roof, backlit by fire. The voice said they had brought ladders, but they beat them anyway. It was a ragtag group of defenders. They all looked like human tigers. Hedge called up saying he liked the paint. The man replied, it wasn't paint. There was silence for a moment, then the man said they could come up if they like. Trots hesitated, but Pran said that they should, as he had a feeling about this man and his followers. Pran would be last to climb the ladders, but he saw a picker hanging back. He knew she was in pain and asked if she took a wound. they should see Mallet. She told him that wouldn't help and not to worry about it. When he reached the top and looked around, it resembled a shanty town to him. Food and water here and there, and tarp shelters. Even a flag had been raised, a child's tunic. The leader of the survivors approached Picker, saying she had something for him. It was the torques he wanted, and she was happy to give them to him, saying they had been killing her, getting tighter and tighter. She was told they would be on her forever. Even Quickben said that. Can't make a deal with Treach. The Tiger of Summer is insane. The man cut her off, saying Treach was dead. He had ascended, and he will take the torques. He thanked her for delivering them. Pran watched as the Daru slid the torques on. They clicked into place, and he saw an amber flash in the man's helm. Pran thought that there was a powerful beast within the man. They made a formidable pair. Something about this man is important, and something will happen here. Paran's presence was no mistake. Paran introduced himself, and the man replied, saying they sure took their sweet time getting here. Paran said they did the best they could. They would be relieved tonight by the white-faced Barghast clans. Edge said the building was unstable. The man said it was filled with bodies. They must be swelling. Paran asked for his name, and he introduced himself as Gruntle. Paran asked if they were some sort of temple warriors or sect. He said no, they were no one. This was all for a woman, and now she's dying. Mallet interjected and asked which tent. Gruntle said the Denul Warren was poisoned. Mallet was a little surprised that Gruntle noticed this, and again asked which tent. Gruntle pointed to the tent, saying it was bad. Blood in the lungs. She might already... He didn't finish his sentence. They found the woman in the tent, pale and with blood dried to her lips. Mallet laid his hands on the woman, and Paran had to stop him, reminding him of last time. He nearly died. Mallet said it wasn't his gift he was using. It was Barghast spirits. Someone had taken a personal interest. It might be too late anyways, but he would try. He said there was wounded flesh and spirit. He would need to heal both, but needed help. Pran realized it wasn't being asked of him, so he kept quiet. Mallet kept talking. You will sacrifice so many for this woman? I can't see these threads you speak of. Not her, nor Gruntle, nor the man at my side. Pran wished he would leave him out of this. Mallet continued. I'll take your word for it. Shall we begin? Moments passed with Mallet and his hands motionless on the woman. She moved on her pallet bed and moaned. Suddenly, the tent was torn away around them, and Gruntle stood in disbelief. Trot said there was no such thing as too late, while Ansi welcomed the Bridgeburners to Capustan.
Woofda, man. Good job, dude.
Yeah, a lot going on here.
Definitely a lot, but it's very straightforward action at the same time, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah, and I didn't really have too much here as far as talking points, and some of them we kind of already talked about a little bit. But
yeah, sure.
My first thought here is when Trots and everybody stops at this gate. They're reloading crossbows. It just, to me, it reminds me of the movie Aliens when they're just outside the alien hive and they're like getting ready to go into it, and they're just kind of, you get this like really fucking cool shot like behind the Marines, just like, and they're looking at like, what the hell is this? And then the commander in their little armored personnel carrier, he's like, what are we looking at? And one guy's like, I don't know, man, I just work here. That's just like what I think of when it reminded me a lot of that. Sure.
Yeah, no, I could totally see that image. And I can apply it towards this universe too. So yeah, that's a good call out.
I'm sure it wasn't inspired by the movie or anything. It's just like, that's just what goes on in my brain. I think of Aliens a lot.
It's all good. I do in moments as well. So yeah, no, what I thought was, I guess, cool but sad at the same time is just like how unorganized the Panion Domain is. And like, yeah, they've got a lot of numbers, but like they're not organized, right? So like even their opponents may be smaller in numbers, but they're more efficient. They end up winning these small skirmishes because the Panion Domain is running around with its head cut off, right?
Yeah, well, and part of me wonders, like, I don't know that I think it's just the Tenascowry that are an unorganized mess. Like, I feel like the Seer Domain and like all the other troops are probably more organized since they're actual soldiers. And these guys are just fucking mess. Like, it's just like people. Like, they're not trained. They don't have anything. like they're probably lucky to have a tent. So
Right.
like I'm not surprised that they're unorganized and like and that's definitely to the Bridgeburners' advantage for sure.
It was an easy entrance for the Bridgeburners, and like Trots, it makes sense as to why it was easy. Like I didn't feel disappointed because it wasn't harder. Like it makes sense that it was that easy to get in,
Yeah. My next thought, again, something this we kind of already talked about, but Picker and the Torques, she says they've been killing her, they've been getting hotter and tighter and tighter. And I feel like, it's got to be like a proximity type thing. Like they must want to get to Gruntle or whoever would be like his equivalent, right? Like if it wasn't him, if it was somebody else, like they must be like drawing Picker to that person so that in this case, Gruntle can have them. And I don't know what kind of powers it's going to like grant him or whatever, but.
Sure. Do you think that it's possible that Picker, even though while it was not mentioned, was kind of leading the pack of Bridgeburners after they basically made their way into Capustan?
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know. I didn't think about that at all. Maybe.
Okay. I'm just going to go with it because that's what makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely was not a thought in my head. That's cool. I like that.
Yeah. I like this section, even though it's as straightforward as it is, because like it's segmented, right? Like they approach Capustan, they make their way in by using Moranth munitions to upset whatever organized things are in their way. And then they make it in, and then you get like this, like the aftermath, right? Like, in movies or games or whatever media you consume in these like post-apocalyptic type stories, you get an aftermath, right? Like 10,000 bodies everywhere. Like you get a good sense of what has taken place, 2/3 of the fallen were obviously the Panions, So I just love how descriptive and visionary he was in this section without having to describe it.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I guess I must have skipped over that point, but yeah, that street, like I couldn't imagine walking down a street and I'm thinking, like, okay, so there's buildings on both sides of the street, or, maybe some of them are reduced to a pile of rubble, but like on this one street alone, there could be more, but there's at least 10,000 dead bodies. And even for like a battle hardened soldier, that's gotta have an effect on you. That's gotta leave some sort of mark. I mean, that's so much death in one spot, and that's only one street. I don't know how that, like what kind of, I guess, trauma that would leave on you. Like, be like, fuck, dude, like, sure glad I wasn't here.
Well, right. And even just like, from what I remember about the tenement that Gruntle is on is that it's 3 or 4 stories, and they're climbing bodies 2 or 3 to 4 stories up, some type of like man-made ramp, but with fucking bodies.
Yeah,
it's crazy to think about. And again, it's just all of this, you have to use your imagination, but Erickson makes it so easy to do with just the way he sets his scene in the section.
Yeah, it was gnarly for sure.
Yeah. And then just the whole Barghast sacrificing so many for Stony, right?
I don't know if I made a connection there. What do you mean? How were they sacrificing?
Well, see, you wrote it in here. Mallet is kind of like talking to himself,
Yep.
And Paran kind of realizes that he's not talking to him. So he just kind of like, whatever, leave it be. But he says, Mallet goes, you will sacrifice so many for this woman. So I'm wondering, is this how healing works? Is that like a spirit of that Warren has to be willing to sacrifice its existence to heal someone?
Okay.
Is kind of like the thought that I got.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, yeah, he was, I got the sense he was definitely talking to the Barghast, but I guess I never really thought too deeply on what that sacrifice must have meant.
Right.
Like, are a bunch of Barghasts going to die here now to save her? Or is it, like you said, a spiritual thing?
Right. Well, and I mean, it kind of makes me feel, because what do we know about Stony is that she like pledged herself to Cruel, right? Through Karuli. And
Yeah.
why would the Barghast say, they said that like we see that we have a need for her, or whatever it was, or someone had taken a personal interest, so to speak. And this kind of tells me that Cruel and the Barghast have made an alliance, which brings me back to the Thrall with Karuli, who basically kind of extends like an invitation, right? And Hatan says something and like, oh, is really like he would do that? You know, like I forget the whole semantics around that scene, but that's kind of what I remember. So I think that these Barghast spirits and Cruel have made an alliance.
I think that makes sense.
So like the Barghast are doing Cruel a favor by allowing Stony to live.
Which must tie itself to Gruntle, because like I wonder if she died, like would Gruntle just basically like walk away from it, or would it be the opposite? Would he just go insane and like go on a major warpath?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like maybe it's a little bit maniacal, right? You know, to use Stony as the carrot in front of Gruntle's face. I mean, if we go back to all those chapters ago when, you know, the siege started, what happened to Stony that made like Gruntle go, oh, now I'm in this, right? Like, whereas before he was really apathetic about it, didn't care, indifferent, you know, and now he's in it, right? So you take Stony away, what do you have? You don't have motivation to keep the player on the game board.
Or very little, anyways.
Right. So, yeah, I guess that's all I can really ask or say or talk about in this section. It was very straightforward and, you know, visionary. You see the aftermath. You see how they get in. You see how they meet up with Gruntle and company. You know, they save Stony.
Yeah. Yeah. Another pretty wild section here.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I'm ready to move on if you are.
For sure. Yeah. Take it away, man.
All right. Sounds of fighting from the north and east brought in the dawn. The Barghast had finally engaged in the enemy. Picker and company would later learn of that bloody battle at the landings and shores of the Caitlin River. The Baran and the Enkrata clans were sent to the landings, as we read previously, and they were met with new recruits of Panian cavalry. Rather than defend the poor positions, the Panian commander chose to counterattack, which left the two Barghast clans harried and surrounded on all sides. The Baran were the first to break, and the Enkrata held until midday. Tor sent members of the Guilt clan to their aid. This clan was used to fighting against enemies on horses. Because of this, they turned the tide of the Panian's commander's counterattack. The Panian infantry were driven into the shallows of the Caitlin River and slaughtered. The surviving Panian infantry retreated north along the marshlands. This also proved to be a fatal error, as their horses got stuck in the mud. They were sitting ducks for the Gilk. By that night, Septarch Kulpath's reinforcements had been obliterated. Tar's push into the city caused a panicked retreat, leaving factions of the Panian and Tenascauri scrambling to get out. Tar pursued, driving the Panians out onto the plain to the west. Picker watched the mad dash from her spot on the rooftop tenement. Despite the horror she was witnessing, she strangely felt like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. Where her torques had been still ached, and she wondered about that, but didn't really have the time to mull things deeper. There wouldn't be leaving the rooftop until the routed enemy had passed. Things had been tricky outside of the gate, but once it had been easy once they got inside the city. Easier than she had expected, and there hadn't been one single clash of swords from the Bridgeburners. She wonders where Brood and Dujek were, as Paran had sent Twist to inform Dujek and Brood of Tar, unifying the white-faced clans, and that they were a march south to Capustan. Without Quick and Spindle being afraid of the Warrens, there was no way to know if Twist had even made contact. Picker has some dark thoughts about Dujek and Brood's army being wiped out by something nasty. The Barghast didn't seem interested in anything outside of the liberation of Capustan, and that was so that they could retrieve their ancestors' bones. She wondered what Paran would do when the Barghast eventually left. Her thoughts switched to how deathly Paran looks, and that the noble was sick. Stony Manakis approached Picker at her side. The two women introduced themselves to each other. Stony explains that she and Blend had been talking about the torques that were on Picker's arms and asked if she was a follower of Drake. Picker tells her that she's not and that she just thought the torques were charms of some kind. Stony explains that Picker didn't know that she was chosen to deliver the torques. Picker turns to Stony and puts it together. Stony never imagined that Gruntle would have become what he's become. Stony admits that she's a little surprised by it and rattles off a few reasons. She reveals that anyone else but him would have been a better choice. It was beyond the strange markings for Stony that made Gruntle seem unrecognizable. It was his eyes, how cat-like they had become, just as cold and inhuman as a tiger. Picker explains that maybe it was all set up by Drake. And yes, she had a part in it, but her part is over and she's not going to give it any more thought. Stony was shaking her head and explained that she has already knelt for another god and that she's made her choice and it wasn't Drake. Picker, in all her incredible insight, offers to Stony that maybe her god found the whole thing with Gruntle becoming Treach very useful, because humans aren't the only ones that spin webs and play games. It was at this moment a realization struck her and was silent for a moment. Picker's eyes narrowed as she swung around and searched around until she spotted Paran. Ganoz looked up and Picker asked how Tattersail was doing. The Bridgeburners all stopped to stare, and Paran looked as if he had been struck. He eventually recovered and said that Tattersail was alive. Picker's thoughts turned to Paran hiding things from them. As the last time they were in the dark, that dark swallowed damn near all of them. To prod Paran more, Picker asked how Tattersail was doing and how far away she was. Paran clutched his stomach. Picker was now upset. Officers always held out, but it was the one thing the Bridgeburners despised the most, as ignorance was fatal. Paran seemed to recover and explain that Tar was driving Panion straight into Dujek and Brood's lap, and that they were maybe 3 leagues away. Ansi chimed in and asked Paran if they knew they were coming. Paran answered yes. Picker couldn't help but wonder how tight his connection to Silver Fox was, but why hasn't Paran told the Bridgeburners about it? Paran glared at Ansi but made no reply to his question. Ansi took control of the situation and was speaking on behalf of all Bridgeburners. He rambles off all they've been through, and on top of that, not knowing if they were alone or not, or if Dujek was alive or the Alliance had held. Paran tried to cool Ansi down, but the sergeant wasn't having it, and he reached for his sword. Picker told Ansi to hold on a damn minute. Paran told Picker to be quiet, then turned his back to Ansi and told the sergeant to get it over with. Mallet chimes in and explains that not is all what it seems with Paran. Picker recalls Mallet having several conversations with Whiskey Jack and Quick Ben, and Mallet to start explaining. Mallet confirms that Silver Fox is speaking with Paran. Mallet also explains to the rest what Paran has been going through, and that he has every reason to be tight-lipped. But that doesn't mean he's setting them up for another betrayal. Picker fixed her gaze on Paran. He stood with his back turned, not moving. Picker realizes that Mallet is right, and he somehow has a way of always doing that. She guesses that Pale's burns are still far away from healing. Woofed up. I thought this was a very interesting section because it's kind of almost like Picker and Ansi are really triggered by not knowing what's going to happen and what the next play is, because that's gotten them into trouble before, and especially because of Pale, which I'm assuming is from when the tunnels collapsed, right? Like that's
what I was thinking too. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's just kind of cool to learn that the Bridgeburner captain at that time was hiding something, which could have been that the captain knew the tunnels were going to collapse, which tells me that he was in on, or they were in on, whatever Empress Lacine's plan was, or Tashrin's plan, or whatever the case may be, you know?
Which makes sense why they have a hard time with captains and they kill them off quite frequently in this company.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like explanatory without having to be like over explanational, if that's a fucking word.
Sure.
The first thing that I had commented about was Picker's thoughts about Dujek and Brood's army being wiped out by something nasty. And I can kind of understand where she's coming from here. I mean, I would be in the same place after hearing about what the Barghast were saying about the Kel Hunters out on the plain, and then Spindle being afraid to use his warrens because of the sickness, right? Like, you hear these rumors, you haven't seen them, but you hear them, and you can't help but worry about your, compatriots that you don't
Right.
even have a way of knowing whether they know that or not. So like, it's just, I think it adds to the level of tension in the section.
For sure.
I liked Stoney and Picker's kind of interaction here. And when Stoney's kind of explaining to Picker how she didn't know that she was chosen to deliver the Torques, I'm a little unsure about how this is the case. I mean, I remember them being taken from Munug at the very beginning of the book. And I remember the Torques were wrapped in cloth that had belonged to Trake, or were once his skin or something like that. But how does that all the way in the beginning equate to Picker delivering them?
I do not know.
Like, to me at the beginning of the book, that all seems, I wouldn't say happenstance, but for lack of a better word, like, I don't see how that would have been. It seems too random for that to be the case. We're like, I don't know.
Just too convenient.
A little bit, but I mean, it makes sense. I don't even know what these Torques do. They very well could be just like a minor thing. I don't know.
I think they're going to have some. I think they're going to be pretty important to Gruntle somehow. I don't really know if they're going to give him like superhuman powers or something like that. I don't know.
Maybe they're like Brukalian's sword, right? You know how that seems to have been tied to Fenner itself? Like, they can call upon, you know what I mean? Like, it was a sword that, essentially breathed fire. I doubt that is a mechanical feature, like
Right.
That's more than likely sorceress. So I guess that's kind of how I view the Torques.
Guess we'll have to read on and find out.
Yeah, they're just a link, literally links to Trake.
I feel like they got to be like, I think that's true, but I think there's something more there. I don't know what it is yet.
Yeah, no, that's fair. My last thought is just, again, the Bridgeburners just kind of give in to their emotions right here about Haran hiding the secret, this communication with Silver Fox, right? And I like the tension, and, Ansi was about ready to fucking kill Paran, right? So, it was a weird way to end the section. I'm glad this was not the end of the chapter.
Yeah, as I think my long section's coming up here pretty quick, isn't it? Is it this next one?
Well, yes.
Maybe not. I don't know.
I think the one before it was longer, just a little bit. But I think this is my favorite section.
Yours that you just did here?
No, the one that you're about to do.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, I was a little upset that you got to do that one.
Sorry, man. Well, hopefully I did it justice for you.
I'm sure you have.
I don't think this is my longest one.
No. But this is the one with Silver Fox, right? Or, Nightchill?
I don't remember. Honestly, where they have their like back and forth.
Yeah.
I don't remember, to be honest.
I'm pretty sure this is it.
It's going to be a surprise for me too.
All right. Well, I guess without further ado, I'm ready to move on if you're ready to move on.
All right. Section 5 here. Well, this is about, completing this will be about the halfway mark.
About that, as far as sections go. Talking, I don't know.
Fair, right. All right, here we go. Paran hardly heard anything behind him as he felt the pressure of Silver Fox's presence. He wished for death rather than yielding. A sword in the back, or he could jump into the mob below. Either way would work. He knew she was close. It was as if she strode across a bridge made of bones from wherever she was to where he was now. But no, he thought it wasn't her power. It wasn't her, it was her power. That was more than just Tattersail. He did not know how he knew, but he knew Dujek and One Arm were not under attack. This was Nightchill, or Belladin, or perhaps both together. What did they want? He was hit with an image in his mind so clearly he almost heard it snap. dry flagstones within a cavern, deep carved lines showing a deck as if they were alive. Obelisk, the unaligned, a leaning monolith of green stone jade, towering above dunes. There were 3 ragged and broken figures dying in the monolith's shadow. Behind them it grew stranger yet as the sky tore open as a god's hoof covered in fur touched the ground. Pran realized that the god didn't choose this. It was pulled down. Fenner was good as dead, trapped in the mortal realm like a baby on an altar. All that was needed now was a knife and a willing hand to do the deed. Bleak knowledge filled his mind, and Pran wanted nothing to do with it. Choices were being demanded of him by forces that were ancient beyond imagining. The deck of dragons was being played by the elder gods, and they now wanted him to play. Pran thought this is what it must be to be the master of the deck, if that's what he really was. He saw what was being asked of him. One god falls, push another into its place. Mortals were sworn to one, now swear them to another. They were like pebbles on a board. Pran was pissed enough that it pushed his pain away. He thought to himself, "You have my attention, Night Chill, or whoever you are." Perhaps there had been masters of the deck in the past that were easily manipulated to do their bidding, but if they think to do that with him, they have made a large mistake. Pran was on edge, and he felt amusement in the reply. He told Night Chill he would not be collared. He would be taking a step forward, and between the two of them, he didn't know what a man like Gruntle had to lose. He is where they wanted him, but Pran can sense his wounds. Until they find another way to motivate their pawn besides using pain, Pran would be fighting them every step of the way. They all have their own lives to live, and they are not for the gods to play with. He reminded Night Chill that she opened this path between them, and if she gave him an excuse, he would come riding the blood of a hound of shadow. And if he wanted to, he could call the others. All of them. He understood something now. Inside Dragnipur, 2 hounds of shadow returned to the Warren of Darkness. He asked Night Chill if she knew what that meant. Then he told her they were going home, and he could call them back. He heard a voice he did not recognize saying he did not know what he threatened. Her brother's sword hides more secrets than he could contemplate. Pran smiled, saying it was worse than that. The hand that now owned Dragnipur belongs to darkness. Anamander Rake, the son of the mother. The path had never been so straight or short. Should he tell him what happened within his own sword? The female voice spoke, saying if he did, Rake would kill him for it. Pran said he had already had several opportunities and reasons, yet he stayed his hand. Perhaps she didn't know the Lord of Moonspawn as well as she thought. There is nothing predictable about Anamander Rake. Perhaps this is what frightens her about him. She told him not to pursue this course of action, and Pran said he would do anything to cut her strings. In her eyes, mortals were weak, and she used that as justification for manipulation. She said the struggle they face is far greater than he can know. Pran demanded that she explain it to him, show it to him. Night Chill said she could not. To save his sanity, she would not show him. Pran called her a bitch. Night Chill said pain was not their only way of motivation. Appearances deceive. Pran asked if keeping them ignorant was her idea of mercy. She said it was a poorly worded response, but nonetheless it was true. Pran said if he was to be the master of the deck, he could not be left ignorant. He needed to know everything. She said in time, and Pran sneered. She asked him to grant this small mercy. The struggle before them was no different than a military campaign, but the field of battle is no less than existence itself. Small victories are vital in the contribution to the pandemic war they must undertake. Pran asked who she meant by we. Night Chill said the remaining elder gods and others less cognizant of their role. Pran asked if Cruel was responsible for Tattersail's rebirth. She said yes, that was her brother, but not the brother who made Dragnipur, as he could only act indirectly. He was chained within the weapon he created, slain by Anamander Rake. Stunned, Pran thought back. He had talked to Draconis, but could not remember anything of what he said. He needed to go back into the sword. He needed to talk to Draconis. Night Chill called him Jen Nysan Rule, and said that Draconis had made use of him when he was in the sword. Was it so hard to believe? He faces eternity within the sword. He sought a way to outsmart the curse. It wasn't a question when Pran spoke. saying she wanted him to free Draconis from the sword. Nightshill said yes, they needed him, but to free him, the sword must be shattered. Pran thought that would free everyone and everything within the sword as well. Nightshill said if there was any hope of keeping the untold number of souls within the sword from escaping as well, Draconis would be the one to know. She told him to think on it. There was still time. Pran said he was glad to hear that, and Nightshill said they were not as cruel as they were made out to be. Pran asked if vengeance had turned her heart black. She said it had, but not against some minor players who acted out her betrayal. Her betrayal was foretold, a curse, and the one who gave that curse was the focus of her vengeance. Pran said he was surprised whoever cursed her was still around. She said that was the nature of their curse against him. Pran said they deserved each other. Pran asked what they had done to Tattersail. Nightshill said nothing, only her attention was elsewhere, and they would not harm her. There is honor and integrity within her. Those are rare qualities for someone so powerful. They had faith. Pran woke to a hand on his shoulder. Mallet said they thought they lost him for a moment. Pran asked how long it had been. Only a dozen heartbeats. Pran said good. They needed to get to the Thrall. His Bridgeburners were all avoiding his gaze, and he didn't know why. Pran told Gruntle he was coming. He knew. Yeah, this is a cool section, and I do like it, but I don't think it's my favorite. I think my longest section is my favorite one out of this.
That one's definitely a second for me. Yeah.
Yeah. This definitely was a good chapter with a lot of good parts to it.
For sure.
My first thought here, where he wasn't sure if it's Nightshill, Bellarden, or perhaps both of them together, what did they want? I just kind of wonder why he just doesn't open up and communicate with them to figure it out, because maybe that would ease some of this burden he's got going on.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that he just didn't want to talk to Silver Fox. Yeah. I don't know. I guess it's kind of like three-way dialing. Three people. One of them you don't want to talk to, but you don't know which ones are going to answer.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, but I also kind of feel like at this moment in time, this section kind of confirms that he's accepted his role, and I feel like it's only because he's curious.
I think I feel the same way. Like, it's like he's slowly coming around to it. Like, he's definitely reluctant, but I think he kind of says it in, I guess, less words, but he's like, if I'm going to do this, I need to know what the deal is. So if you tell me, I'll do it. But
Right.
like this bullshit of you like hiding things from me, that ain't going to fly.
Right.
My next thought here, I thought it was really cool where we hear about Obelisk and this unaligned monolith of greenstone jade towering above the dunes. Like, dude, like that's got to be a callback to Dead House Gates. The fucking hand coming out of the sand. I don't know what else that could be. It's got to be that. And then it's talking about the three ragged and broken figures. It's got to be Heberick, Fellison, and was it Bowden, or was there somebody else for a little bit? I don't remember, but like,
Yeah,
that's got to be
right.
what that's all about, right?
Right, which is cool because like, and I know that like I have made so many damn equations to this particular scene. I was probably just picking up on the foreshadowing earlier on in this book, but I feel like this concretely right here tells us where these two books line up with each other. That part is not like, it's definitely within like the first 300 pages of Dead House Gates, somewhere in there. It was like pretty much right after they escaped Skullcap, right?
I don't remember where exactly it was, but I was just excited to get like a little bit more of that because, yeah, I don't know like what the hell that hand is, but it's obviously important. And just to like, we got a little bit more of it here, but it still really tells us nothing, or at least not anything that I can make sense of.
Well, I feel like these jade figures, whatever they are, this is the unaligned obelisk from the Deck of Dragons.
But what is I mean, what is it going to do? Like, what does that mean? I still don't feel like there's a ton there to tell us anything right now. Like, I don't feel like we got enough info to really know much.
For sure, but I mean, we kind of have an image to the card, I guess you could say. You know, like
Sure.
Opon is an unaligned card, and now we know that obelisk is jade.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll get on board.
Yeah, I'm sure more will happen, but you know, it kind of goes back to everything, well, not everything, but you know, some parts in Dead House Gates where a lot of the readings of the Deck of Dragon are obelisk dominates, right? And Kalam's like, no, that can't be right because obelisk doesn't pertain to 7 cities. But clearly it did.
Just got to find out more. Yeah, I don't know.
Right. And I feel like maybe this is me drawing at straws, but I could have swore somewhere in Gardens of the Moon, Cruel said that he was aligned with Obelisk too.
Maybe somebody listening can confirm or deny that. I have no idea. I don't remember at all.
Yeah. So I think that that's interesting. So maybe it's like an artifact from Elder God time. I mean, I don't know.
We'll just have to find out.
Right. But yeah, no, I like this particular part was my favorite because like I love it when other books get tied in, even though they're all taking place at different times. Well, not like chronologically. It's essentially around the same time, but I'm just, like scenes that you got a very descriptive understanding of, but didn't really know the meaning. And now we're getting the meaning, which ties to the description. I love that shit.
Yeah.
So
I think I'm going to guess that like your favorite part of this section was just the talk of like Dragnipper and like within the sword and that stuff. Would that be right?
Well, yeah, because I know, I don't remember how long ago it was, but I had predicted that the 2 hounds that were killed by Dragnipper, that it was the Warren of Darkness that Paran sent them into.
I guess I don't really remember that, but I just figured like, okay, like, because I definitely think that was a cool part, like where we're talking about, Dragnipper, and I think we definitely get that confirmation that he talked to Draconis. Well, I mean, it says he did, but he doesn't remember what he said to him, and I don't remember that conversation either.
I don't either, but something about that interaction gave Draconis what he needed, which I think is interesting because it brings him back. It almost kind of makes it seem like Draconis like willingly allowed himself to be killed by his own creation so that he could escape his curse. Like that seems to be the game here.
Oh, interesting. Again, I did not think of that, but interesting.
Right? Like that seems to be the game, is to break Calor's curse. And, Cruel is they're starting to amass followers, right? Like that's evidence with Stony and Caruli, right? Draconis, he pretty much, I guess I would have to go back and read the prologue, right? Like, I'm kind of excited to do that. Maybe that's what we do at the end too, is we reread the prologue and we talk about how it ties into everything, because that's like the one big thing that everybody keeps telling us to do. So maybe that's what we'll do before we have our big like party.
Sure. Yeah, I think we could definitely do that.
Yeah, like read the epilogue and the prologue.
Yeah, we do that. I liked how Paran was he's kind of just, I feel like he's bluffing a little bit. He's like talking all this big game to try to get like Nightchill to back off and to give him some info. He's making these threats and stuff. And, he's like, oh, well, I'll come at you with the Hounds of Shadow. I'll get all of them and we're going to, fuck up your day. I don't know. I just thought it was really cool. There was a lot there. And I don't know that I've got the words for it right now.
I mean, yeah, I get where you're going, but I think that I know that in this section he mentions that like Opon, or like another god tried it. Ask Opon how it went for him or them, So like I think he's just got this like weird confidence, like, hey, I've defied a god before, so like fuck you.
Right. Let's see here. I thought it was interesting how this whole conversation that he had, it'd feel like it probably took the span of 10 minutes or whatever, and Paran's kind of shaken too, and it's only been seconds. I thought that was really interesting. I don't really know what that tells us, but just that time passed so much differently than how it felt to Paran.
Yeah, which I guess is a good thing, maybe, like the link is that speedily, however you want to say it.
Sure. Yeah.
Huh?
And my last thought here, all the Bridgeburners avoiding his gaze, and he didn't know why. I don't know if you had any thoughts to that, but I don't really know what was going on there.
I did respond to it. I
didn't read it yet.
Oh, okay. It's because of the tension that was built prior to his conversation with Nightchill. Ansi was about to strike him down, right? And Paran simply just turns his back so that it could be done, right? all of the tension from my previous section about Haran and the Bridgeburners being a little triggered by not having all of the information be as transparent as they would like it, because they equate that non-transparency to ignorance, which are not exactly the same thing. So I think that this is why Haran is a little bit like, everyone's looking at me and I'm not really sure why, but like, okay, I'll just go with it. It's kind of like the feeling I get from it.
Gotcha. Okay. I don't have any reason to not agree with you on that.
Okay.
But at the time, I'm like, it didn't really make any sense to me. So I'm glad you had a good idea on that.
All right. Well, yeah, it was a great section. I loved it. I hope we get more of that as we continue to go through this story or through this book, and even in later books too. I hope that that's something that develops. So yeah, I'm ready to go if you are.
All right, let's do it to it.
Tell it, Lars. All right. Itkovian from Jalarkin's tower stood looking east. He was exhausted, and all he'd been through up to this point was taking its toll. The defense of the dead prince in the great hall had been brutal. The hallways and entrances housed bodies like a slaughterhouse. A lone scout had reported that the battles at the coast were drawing to an end. Itkovian had watched as the Barghast clans pushed into the city, and watched as the Panions attempted their withdrawal from the city. Few Barghast scouts ventured into the tower's ground, but no preliminary contact had been established. Velbara, the recruit, stood next to Itkovian. He thought to himself that she was a recruit no longer, and had withstood the most important lesson, and that was staying alive. The long silence was broken when Itkovian told Velbara that they will yield the tower now, and that they have unfinished business at the Thrall. Velbara is concerned that the Barghast will mistake them for the enemy. Itkovian assures her to not worry. The shield anvil glances at the Eastwatch readout one more time. He recalls a couple of Gildrath soldiers that had made it out of there and joined his forces. One had died and the other seemed to be off his hinges. Despite his exhaustion, he sensed a growing unease. Something had happened, as if he had surrendered his faith. Inside his head, he tells himself that he hasn't lost his faith, though. He hasn't yielded his faith to that of doubt or skepticism, or even replaced it. He just felt empty, as if waiting to be renewed. He tells Velbara that the wind was too loud for him, so they will make their leave and go below.
I didn't realize or remember that was such a short section.
Yeah. Like I said, you got fucked in this chapter, man.
Happens.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I only have a couple of comments. I thought that it was cool that we kind of come back to Itkovian, and just kind of establishing that he's just been kind of watching, the Barghast kind of come into the city and more or less take control. It sounds like from Itkovian's perspective is that these small skirmishes that he's watching with the Barghast and the Panions are mainly just kind of like a feint, so that they can buy time for the other Panions to make their exit to the west.
Yeah, just like a tactical retreat or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So it was kind of cool to kind of get that like perspective on how things are kind of moving along, even though that's not really the primary focus of this chapter, is not necessarily the retaking of control of Capustan, but like all of the things that we're talking about. It was kind of cool to just kind of quickly come back to that, from a different character's perspective, one who's been here this whole time. And I would imagine that, the reason why he's willing to yield tower is because like he feels comfortable moving on to his next goal, right?
Yeah.
The last thing that I had is just his growing sense of unease, like something had happened, and I can only assume that this must be the fall of Fenner, as we just learned, right? Well, not that we have just learned it, but that it has been concreted for us. And I'm pretty sure that this is the exact moment, right, where we had previously guessed many times before that Fenner is now gone. And so therefore his faith is still there, but there's nobody to like accept that faith, which makes him feel like something has happened.
Yeah. As God's gone. I mean, that makes sense why he feels empty. Like you said, there's just nothing there now.
Right. Exactly. So yeah, Definitely a lot happens with Kovian as we will read on.
Yeah, I definitely am liking him as a character. I don't know if I don't think he's quite. I don't know who I would say my favorite character in this book is so far, but I would say he's got to be up there.
Yeah, hell yeah. Well, I'm ready for your big ass fucking section.
If this is the big bad one, this was my favorite one.
Okay, all
So,
right.
112 soldiers remained in fighting condition, though all bore wounds of some sort. 17 gray swords lay dead or dying along the wall, and the air smelled of piss. Whoever had built this place would be horrified to see what it had become. The beauty it once held had now turned into a horror scene. On the throne, Prince Jalarkin's skin had mostly been sewn back onto his half-eaten body. Itkovian stood ready to leave, looking at his soldiers. They faced him, still and focused. The two cabin recruits held the reins to the last two war horses. Itkovian thought to address his gray swords, if only to honor tradition, but he found he had nothing to say. Itkovian strode out of the entranceway through a river of corpses that had been cleared so they could walk. He heard fighting in the distance at Jalarkin's concourse, but here, in front of him, it was silent. This had once been a thriving place, and the silence shook Itkovian for the first time since the siege had began. He asked Fenner to help him find victory in this. He walked down the stairs, and his company followed without a word. This would be a long journey, and one filled with a different kind of fight. One where swords and armor were useless. A soul that was hardened against humanity was the only defense here. Itkovian knew the price for that was high. Itkovian thought to himself that he is the shield anvil. He surrenders to what is before him. A city had been killed, and he hoped those who survived in the tunnels below never emerged to see this. Now the white-faced Bargas clans had given the Panians what they had once given the citizens of Capustan. Itkovian thought they were all pushed in a world of madness, but it fell to each of them to pull back from the abyss. From horror, grief must be fashioned, and from grief, compassion. Ahead of Itkovian, Bargas came forward, the one in front grinning at Itkovian, and asked how the gift of liberation felt. Itkovian answered and said they have kin at the Thrall. Even now the protective magic faded. The Bargas said they would see the bones of their gods, and said Itkovian led a group of women. Itkovian confirmed and said they were the city's greatest resource. They are gray swords now, and they are stronger because of it. The Bargas said they saw his brothers and sisters everywhere, and had they been their enemies, they would be glad they were dead. Itkovian asked then how about his allies. He said their loss fills the shadows they cast. Understand this. The enemy they were left with was brittle. Itkovian shrugged, saying the Panian faith knows no worship, only necessity. Their strength was a shallow thing. He asked if they would accompany them to the Thrall. The Bargas said they would be at their side. Honor resides in their shadow. Most of the buildings they passed on their journey were destroyed, but they passed one that still stood. Itkovian thought it was barricaded. The Bargas said, "Your kind crowd your barrows." Itkovian did not understand, and the Bargas said it was easier than digging ditches. Looking back, Itkovian saw that it was flesh that barricaded the windows. He did not think it would have been possible to do this in a defensive manner. The Bargas warriors said they had wandered too close to the building, and it gave off heat and jellied liquid bleeds from the cracks. They fled. Itkovian asked if they had seen others like this, and they said no. However, there was one building that had animated corpses at the doors, foul with necromancy. They will be happy to be done with the city. Itkovian said nothing. The Reeve of Fenner spoke the truth of war, the cruelty that humanity could inflict on each other. For those who led, war was only a game, but that game couldn't survive reality, and that reality seemed to have no limits. Itkovian felt like a caged animal, denied escape, poked and prodded on all sides, but he must assume the burden no matter what cost him. Fires of vengeance had undergone a transformation within him, and he would be the redemption for the souls lost in the city. He thought to himself, redemption for them, but not for him. He prayed to Fenner, asking what had happened. Where was he? He knelt, waiting for his touch, but he was nowhere to be found. Fenner's realm was empty. Where now would he, Itkovian, go? He, Itkovian, was not done, and he could accept this. But when he is, who would be waiting for him? Who would embrace him? He would be Fener's grief and hand of justice, all the while he sensed the toll within him it would take. They neared the Thrall, and the other Barghast joined. The sounds of battle at Jalarken's concourse had quieted. The enemy had been driven from the city, and Etkovian did not think the Barghast would pursue, as they had set out to do what they had intended to do. The threat to the bones of their god was no more. If Septarch Kulpath was still alive, he would likely reform his host and prepare for either a counterattack or a westward withdrawal. Both posed risks, and he likely had the numbers to retake the city. But they would soon suffer from lack of supplies. It was not an enviable position to be in. Capustan was a small, inconsequential city on the coast, and it had become a curse. The lives lost here signified the beginning of the war to come. They were on the plaza. Ahead of them was the spot Bruchalion had fallen, though all the bodies were gone, probably taken by the retreating Panions for another feast. Etkovian thought it did not matter, as Hood had come in person for him. But was that an honor, or was it gloating on Hood's part? He looked at the Thrall, its glow now gone. Every approach to the plaza was filled with Barghast, but they came no closer. Etkovian turned his back to his company, and his captain and Valbara said the three of them would go to the center of the plaza. They met another party. It was Gruntle, and Etkovian thought to himself, the mortal sword of Trake, Tiger of Summer. The first hero has ascended, and they have been replaced. The mass council was coming out, holding up one of their own who struggled to stand. Gruntle looked at Etkovian, addressing him and saying it was done. The soldier next to him, who Etkovian didn't recognize, introduced himself. It was Paran, and he said the job was not done. Gruntle interrupted and said he was more than a captain in One Arm's host. What he claims to be? Paran cut him off, saying it was not by his choice. Fener had been ripped from his realm and now wanders a distant land while he, or Etkovian, had lost his god. Gruntle told him, Paran, that Etkovian's role is now done and they should step aside, for a new god of war was about to reign. But it doesn't have to be that way, as a path has been set. Paran looked past Etkovian and welcomed Humbrol Tower, and that his children wait within the Thrall. Tower said they could wait a little longer, as he wanted to witness this. Paran was about to speak again, but Etkovian asked for a moment and stepped past him. Rath'Fener twisted in the hold of his companions and cried out to Etkovian. Etkovian called to his captain to his side as the Reeves' law was invoked. Rath'Fener screamed, saying he couldn't do this. Only the mortal sword could invoke the Reeve. Etkovian did not move. The priest was able to get one hand free. Pointing at Etkovian, he said he was the Destriant, unless he had someone to claim that title. Etkovian said Destriant Carnatus was dead. The priest said he was no Destriant, perhaps an aspirant. Thus, only a mortal sword can invoke the Reeve against him. He knew Etkovian knew this too. Gruntle snorted and spoke to Etkovian, saying Paran had told him there was a betrayal. The priest had sold Bruchalion's life to the Panions, which was disgusting and not a very smart move. Gruntle asked if any mortal sword would do. If so, he invoked the Reeve. Gruntle bared his teeth, and to the priest said to punish the bastard. Rath'Fener howled that he could not do that. Etkovian said it was a bold claim, and if Rath'Fener wanted to deny his claim to the title, he must call down their god. If he did, then he could walk away a free man. Rath'Fener said he knew that was impossible. Etkovian coldly told him his defense was over, and he would be Fener's hand of justice. Rath'Trake spoke up, saying there's no need for this, and now their god was gone. That changed everything. Surely he understood the implications of the traditional form of punishment, a simple execution, not the Reeves' law. Etkovian cut him off, saying that was denied to this man. Etkovian's captain took Rath'Fener and threw him to the ground, straddling him, and put his arms out forward but side by side. Rath'Fener screamed, understanding what was about to happen. Etkovian drew his sword, smoke wafting from it. He spoke to Rath'Fener as he stood over him. The Reeve, the betrayal to trade Bruchalion's life for your own, betrayal, the foulest crime to the Reeves' law. To Fener himself, punishment is invoked, in accordance with the Boar of Summer's judgment. Pray, sir, that Fener finds what we send to him. Crying out, Rath'Fener said he won't. His realm, their god, was no longer within it. Paran said he knew this. He knew, and this is what happens when it gets personal. For what it was worth, he, Paran, didn't want any part of this. Rath'Fener asked who the hell he was. Paran said at this moment he was the master of the deck, and it seems he is here to negotiate on you and your god's behalf. But the shield anvil is incredibly uncooperative. Eckovian barely heard them talk. He said their god was gone, so he had best pray to a creature of mercy looks down upon him. Rath'Fener tried again to talk Eckovian down, saying this was just as vile as what Rath'Fener had done. His soul would be ripped apart. Eckovian silenced him, saying his judgment belonged to him and the Reeve. Again, Rath'Fener screamed. Eckovian swung his sword. Blood shot out from the stumps of his wrists, but the hands were nowhere to be seen. Rath'Fener fell unconscious when Eckovian stuck the flat of the blade onto his stumps. Paran spoke, saying, with Fenner in the mortal realm, Eckovian could not be blessed. His burden eased. Eckovian knew this. Paran said there was another way. A choice had been fashioned, but he was only the messenger. Rath'Fener said they would welcome him and his followers. They need a shield anvil. Eckovian only said no. He is sworn to Fenner, and if needed, would share his same fate. Rath'Fener said this was an offer of salvation, not betrayal. But Eckovian would hear no more of it, and he was not done with Rath'Fener. A scream came from him, and his arms jerked back as if pulled by another person. Dark tattoos appeared on his body, but not those of Fenner. Alien writing took over his flesh as an unknown entity claimed his soul. Words darkened like burns. Screams of pain filled the plaza. Blisters broke on his body, spilling yellow liquid. Muscles and fat boiled beneath the skin, then breaking through onto the ground. Yet he did not die. Eckovian sheathed his sword, and Paran understood what was happening and grabbed Eckovian's arm, trying to stop this. Eckovian's captain told him to withdraw. Paran did as he was ordered and told her. Even still, she recoiled at what was happening. The captain said that may be true, but if he did not release Eckovian, she would kill him. Eckovian had decided Rath'Fener had suffered enough and asked if he would accept his embrace. For all that was in the troubled priest that led to betray Bruchalion and Fenner, he still clung to some small bit of mercy. He crawled towards Eckovian. Thinking to himself, Eckovian saw this as a final gesture. He assumed his pain and freed his soul to Hood. Paran and the others saw nothing other than Eckovian standing with Rath'Fener in his arms, his screams falling into silence. In Eckovian's mind, he saw the priest's life unfold in front of his very eyes, from a young acolyte until he lost his faith. Eckovian understood him and was able to see every step that led to his eventual betrayal. He thought to himself that he comprehends him, but comprehension is not the same as absolution. So he needed to feel pain. Fenner should have been waiting for him, accepting his severed hand so that he might look upon him in death, that he might give him words only meant for him. But Fenner is gone now, and who now holds him has other desires, but he denies whoever its possession of Rath'Fener. Rath'Fener's soul cried out that he could not leave him with this. He begged Eckovian. Eckovian told his soul that no one was spared their grief, not even him. But once barriers were lowered, there was no choice in what passed through. Suddenly, a storm hit Eckovian. Pain. He opened himself to it. Let its screams fill him. Eckovian thought to himself, "You are found, Rath'Fener. I have you now, and so I answer." Suddenly, there was a mutual awareness beyond the pain, an alien presence, immense power, but it was different. It wanted to make a gift out of the priest's hands, something of beauty, but it was unable. The man's flesh was unable to contain the gift. Eckovian thought, even the gods weep. He would take their grief as well. The alien presence tried to recoil, but it was too late, and it was engulfed. He felt his soul dissolving and tearing apart. It was too vast. Eckovian thought that mortals were the rack upon which gods were stretched. The feeling Eckovian felt was gone. The alien presence had successfully removed itself, leaving Eckovian fading echoes of a distant world's grief. Eckovian felt he needed to atone for every single death. He was lost in the storm, his embrace incapable of closing in around the sheer amount of death and grief. This was his to hold. He was the shield anvil. Redeem them. Without him, death was senseless, and denial of meaning was the world's greatest crime to its own children. Though he now had no god, he would not surrender, but the other gods' fallen children were his. He wanted them to witness what lay beyond his cold face. Paran and the others watched Eccovian kneel with the rotting corpse in his arms. To Paran, it looked as if he carried the exhaustion of the world. Eccovian unstrapped his helm, showing his sweaty and tired face. The corpse crumbled to ash, and the shield anvil drew a sobbing breath. He wondered why everyone watched, yet denied his cries for help. Paran called for Mallet. Eccovian said he didn't know how he did it, but he had brought him back. Paran said he was still the shield anvil. Eccovian repeated it, but thought that it was no mercy. Paran said he could feel it in the air. It had been cleansed. Internally, Eccovian agreed, but he knew he was not done.
Oh, woofda, man.
Yeah, dude, like that was definitely my favorite section. There was a ton here, and I don't really feel like I could summarize it like as perfectly as just writing that whole part of the chapter.
Yeah.
But just like, my God, like just everything that Eccovian is doing is just like insane. I don't know what you think of it, but yeah, I mean, I just like everything he's assuming, like just everything he's taking on by himself. Like, I don't know. I just love this section a lot. Just how dark and like personal it was. I don't know. It just kind of hit home. Like to me, it felt like a battle with, I guess, depression. I mean, I think everybody can relate to that. Everybody's got dark times and you've got to fight it and get through it. And sometimes you need help and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. And, he gets some help here. And I don't think I really summarized it, but like Eccovian kind of died for a moment, I think, or that's how I interpreted it towards the end there. I don't know if you agree or not.
I don't really know. I'm wanting to say that he was just in some type of like visionistic state, Yeah, I guess we could talk about it when we get there.
I think like in your next section, it talks about how like Mallet kind of brought him back. Or maybe that's a different completely. I don't really remember, but yeah, I guess just to start from the top. I mean, there's definitely a lot to talk about here, and I had a few points, but something I didn't jot down. But Eccovians, they leave the Thrall through a river of corpses that had been cleared so they could walk. Again, maybe that's there's not 10,000 dead bodies, but there's still so many that you can't even clear them all. You just have to do enough to create like a walkway. Like, my God, like,
right. Like a hoarded house.
Yeah. It's just wild. I really liked this where Eccovian is talking to the Barghast. They said, if the Barghast say like, if they were their enemies, they'd be glad to see them dead. And Eccovian asks how they feel about them being his allies, and he says their loss fills the shadows they cast. And the enemy they were left with was brittle, so like they might have had immense casualties, but they weakened the enemy so much that like it really wasn't much of a fight. And honor resides in their shadow. Like I thought that was such a cool thing, and it reminded me of the Aiel a little bit. Just kind of the way they talk,
Yeah. I could see that. Yeah, no, that was a really cool line. I like that too.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. And then we get Eccovian here. He knows Fener's not there for him now, so who would be waiting for him? Who would embrace him? And I feel like Eccovian knows how things are going to end for himself, and I think it's likely going to be his death. Maybe not in this book. I don't know if he'll make it beyond this book. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. But it's just like he's so freaking stubborn. He's just loyal to a fault to Fener. Like, Fener's in the mortal realm. He can't really like call upon him, but he's not turning the other way. He's not turning his back on him. He's staying loyal to him.
Right. Yeah.
Not really much for you to say there, I suppose.
Yeah. Sorry, dude. I agree.
No worries. And then Paran is talking about how a path has been set. There's going to be a new god of war. He doesn't have to, I guess I don't really know what I'm trying to say, but do you think he's suggesting that Eccovian follows Trake or Treach?
Yeah, I think Rath Trake kind of suggests it later on. Like, hey, we need a mortal, or we need a shield anvil. So like, you could totally take it. It's not really betrayal. It's more of a path forward,
Right. Yeah, I think that must be what it is. But yeah, and it just shows his stubbornness again. He's just like, nope, I am, Fener's mortal sword, and that's what I'm going to be. I'm not changing now.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like I am 100% committed to this god.
Right. I really loved. To me, this just feels kind of like that fight with like depression. But Ikovian's just so cold, where he's dealing with Rath'Fener, and he's like, I'm gonna fucking wreck your day, dude. And he's like, you know what? If you call your god down, then you're free. And Ikovian very well knows that he can't do that, right?
Right.
And Rath'Fener's like, you know just as well. Like, that's not possible. It can't happen. And Ikovian's just like, well, sucks to suck, dude. I'm going to be Fener's hand of justice and wreck your day. You're fucked. And I was just like, Jesus Christ, that's badass. He's not screwing around one bit. But this must be. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and what's happening to Rath'Fener is worse because Fener's not there, right? So everybody knows, because Fener's not there, that Ikovian is essentially releasing Rath'Fener's soul to whoever first come first serve, right? That in itself is almost worse than the actual punishment.
I think that's what he's afraid of, right? Well, Rath'Fener's afraid of anyways.
Well, right, and everybody's trying to like get Ikovian to stand down, but like as you said before, he's being exceptionally stubborn, and rightfully so. I would be doing the same thing. Give a fuck.
Yeah, it's just that revenge is a dish best served cold is what that feels like to me. Like he's gonna get his. It's not even a day in court. He's getting his revenge. Doesn't really care. I don't know if there's going to be consequences from this or not, but I mean, he just gives zero fucks about it. He's just like, dude, you're a piece of shit. You betrayed Bruchalion, and I don't remember, was it like 300 people with him?
Yeah.
Like you just senselessly killed these people. Like those deaths are on you, and now I'm going to inflict as much pain, damage, suffering onto you as I can.
Right. Exactly.
And then just like was it Velbara? She throws him to the ground, and I had to think about it a little bit, like how he was positioned, with his two arms. They're what I envisioned. They're both out to the same side, left, right, or whatever, or above his head. I don't know. I think they're out to one of the sides, but it's not like one was on each side. He just cut both his hands off in one shot, and I thought it was a cool detail where his sword is smoking. I don't really know what that means, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that means either. Like, maybe it's just a consequence of invoking this type of punishment, I don't know.
Right. Just this whole deal with Rath'Fener was just like so absolutely brutal, and I don't even know what to say about it, but like maybe I'm a little psychotic that I just enjoyed it so much, but I don't know. Fucking Rath'Fener fucking deserved it. Like he had it coming.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I would 100% agree. But again, this kind of goes back to Erickson is explaining things without explaining things, right? Like now we understand what happened to Boric.
Yes, I was going to bring that up at some point. Like this had to be, if it wasn't the same thing, it had to be very similar.
Right, except Fener did embrace his hands, right?
Right. So, yeah, and then it talks about how, we get this alien god, this alien presence with immense power, and it wanted to make a gift out of the priest's hands. Like, first off, what the fuck? Secondly, like what god do you think this could be? I was kind of thinking like the crippled god at first, but then I'm like, I don't know if that really makes any sense. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
No, I do think it is the crippled god.
Really?
Because the crippled god, he wants people with, I don't know how to say it, like faults.
Oh, like flaws or whatever, right?
Yeah, like he wants to recruit this guy is my guess, but I don't think that happens because he was unable to contain the gift.
Like, what do you think he was going to do with his hands?
I don't even know.
But this is where I think, like, the epigraph kind of comes in.
Okay.
I think it's kind of relating to this passage. His flesh wasn't able to contain it or whatever. I don't know. That's just where it kind of hit home to me. I don't really have a way to explain it, but that's just what it felt like to me.
Yeah, I would agree. I think so.
So, and then, so yeah, Eccovian tries to assume all this grief and this pain from this other god. And I don't know if this is just me overthinking things, but it does strike me as odd. But if it means world, echo, it says like fading echoes of a distant world's grief. And if the word world is used as in another planet, like I feel like wouldn't that be alarming to like Eccovian? Like do they know other like planets are inhabited by beings or not? If they do, like I don't know, like I feel like that would be a big deal. Like if there's aliens on another planet.
Well, I think this is referring to where the crippled god came from. He was essentially pulled down, right? Like I don't think that like people don't deny that there are distant worlds. I think that in order for however many mages, I think it was like 11, right? 8 or 11 mages in the prologue, like called down this god. So I think that like maybe not everybody knows, but like a handful of people do know that other worlds exist enough to like pull one down to try to take out a threat, right? And I think that what is happening here is that the crippled god is so shocked that there's somebody here willing to take all of his grief, which would make everything that's happened up to this point all for nothing, right? There's no reason for the crippled god to continue to do what he's doing if there's no grief of what happened to him, how he got pulled apart, the consequence of being chained, to a land you're not familiar with, right? Like, I don't think he was expecting it. And on top of that, Eccovian was willing to take on the grief of his world. So I can only imagine that the crippled god comes from another similar place of chaos and death, right?
Potentially. Yeah.
So,
but I just like, I keep thinking about it from like the other side of things. Like, why is the idea of another planet that's inhabited not an alarming thing to, like in this moment, Eccovian? I don't know. It's just a weird thing for me to think about.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like at this moment in time, he's atoning for everything that happened in Capustan, on top of like anyone else's grief that just wants to pile it on top. The alien presence, the other gods, right? Himself, Rath'Fener, like it just, I think that he's just not thinking about other worlds. I don't know.
I just feel like that would be like the first thing, like, oh, this thing's not from here. Like, what the fuck? Like, if it's here, what else could be out there? I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe it's not a surprise to him because he's one of those few that are aware of it.
Sure. I mean, that's valid for sure. And my last thought here, Pran, he looks at Eccovian and thinks that it looks as if he carried the exhaustion of the entire world. Through all this taking place, you just kind of forget that Eccovian, like, he's really got an audience. He's got whatever contingent of the Bridgeburners there watching him, plus however many Barghast, Humbrol Tower and all his clans watching all this take place. Like, I wonder what they think about all this.
Yeah, I can definitely see where you're coming from there. One thing that you didn't point out that I want to talk about is Paran at the end here said that he could feel it in the air. It had been cleansed. What do you think that is referring to?
I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, like, is it a Warren? But I don't know that it's that. I'm not sure.
I think that what happened is because Eccovian was just willing to accept the crippled god's grief. It took the crippled god so much by surprise that he let whatever hold he had on the poisoning of the Warrens go. He lost it, thus cleansing it.
I guess I would think it's probably not going to take us long to find out if that is the case. But that was my initial thought, that it must be the Warrens, but then I kind of second guess myself.
Gotcha.
I definitely see that side of things, but I don't know that I'm 100% convinced, but I don't know that I have like a really strong backup option to throw your way.
Sure. Fair enough. All right. Well, I mean, yeah, that was a great section. I know the first time I read it, I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? But as I think I read this chapter 3 times on top of my summarizing, so I definitely understand it a lot more. But it feels like very piecemeal, where I understand like pockets of information, but like I don't know how to tie them together correctly, if that makes any sense. So
Yeah,
yeah, I think that that's the intention, is that you're really not supposed to understand everything on your
sure.
first time through, but yeah, I'm good to continue on if you are.
Yeah, definitely. What are we on here?
Section 8.
8?
Yep, this is my second to last one. I feel like the end here kind of goes pretty quick, so
Yeah.
Gruntle stood watching Paran and his healer speak with Idkovian. The fog surrounding his thoughts and his actions had begun to fade. Details of what had happened began to flow back in, and the evidence of change within himself left him alarmed. His eyes saw different. Instinctive decisions are no longer buried deep. The changes he felt were far more profound than the physical differences. The violence inside of him was that of a killer, cold and unstoppable, and this realization scared the shit out of him. Inside his head, he tells himself that if he is Trake's mortal sword, and that he can feel Trake. Cursing, he just wished that he was asked first. He gazed upon his followers, among them was Stony. He thought to himself that she wasn't his follower, as she chose Caruli's elder god. Sensing his gaze, she looked at him, and Gruntle winked at her. She approached him hesitantly and said his name. He tells her that he feels like he just woke up, to which Stony interjects that hangovers will do that sometimes. He doesn't respond to that, but asks what's been going on. Stony, looking confused, asked why he didn't know. Gruntle says that he thinks he does, and kind of briefly goes over what he remembers. Stony is excited, because as to her, he sounds like he's back to his normal self, and she thought she had lost him. Gruntle explains that for a moment, he was lost. Stony then asked when he became the worshipping type. Gruntle sincerely explains that this was a joke on Treach, because Gruntle was far from the worshipping type. They banter a bit more, and to both of them, it had kind of felt brittle. Stony turns the conversation to that of Buke, and how he must be gone. Gruntle explains that Buke is not gone, but rather a soul taken because of Caruli's gift. She gave Caruli a venomous look, and then turned to Gruntle to converse about what their next steps were going to be. As they were conversing, Trake interjected himself into the conversation. Trake explains that he and Gruntle have matters to discuss. Gruntle explains that he already told Trake that he was a bad choice because he doesn't kneel to anyone. Trake said that this wasn't up for debate and that Gruntle was Trake's mortal sword whether he wanted to be or not. They heard laughter and turned to see Paran looking their way, clearly having heard their conversation. Paran tells the priest that it never goes as one would think it should go. Paran explains that this is the glory of humans, and Trake had better make peace with that. Paran tells Gruntle to keep playing by his own rules. Gruntle said that he wasn't really planning to do otherwise, and then asked Paran how Idkovian was doing. Idkovian replied and said that he was fine. Gruntle looked down at his swords in disgust and then put them away. Trake demanded of him that he wasn't done with those until the war was done. Gruntle told the priest that if he said another word, he would be done. I think it's kind of cool that like Gruntle's kind of coming out of this fog, which I guess, I don't know, it makes me a little disappointed that it wasn't really him the whole time, but it kind of was. I mean, I get that something was happening to him, but I didn't get the feeling that it was like taking over his body. I don't know. But in retrospect, this makes more sense than Gruntle just allowing it to happen.
I guess I don't really remember ever feeling like it wasn't fully him, but maybe I just didn't pick up on it.
Maybe. I mean, this is just kind of like what this section is more or less insinuating, is that like something took over him, which is true, but like I just thought it was more Gruntle than it is Ascendant,
Sure.
But outside of that, I liked that and again, I didn't summarize it because we already know about those events, but in his conversation with Stoney, he briefly talks about like what he remembers. So it was kind of cool to get like a really short synopsis of the things that he's gone through. And the last thing that I had was the banter and the very good humor that Erickson threw in here in what I would consider kind of a very serious chapter, especially after what we just talked about. Stoney comments on him like rolling his shoulders during their conversation at one point and how cat-like he was. And she comments on how his muscles rippled underneath his clothes. And then Gruntle kind of says like, well, that's not all we could explore, you know, like, kind of being a creep. So, I just thought that was kind of some good humor.
For sure. Gotta lighten the mood a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. You know, and the other part, Paran laughing at the end here was really cool. Like, Rath, you have no fucking idea. You Gruntle, you just keep doing what you're doing, man. Like, fuck these people. You know? Like,
yeah.
It was just, it was good. I liked the interaction throughout this section.
For sure.
So, but I mean, with that, I didn't really have a lot of comments. I feel like it was kind of getting Gruntle's perspective and kind of talking about how he's starting to notice the changes that everyone else is noticing. But I don't think that's new. It's a headcanon that we have already. Like, he's a fucking tiger, you know?
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm ready to move on if you are.
Yeah. This is my last section here, so we're about done. So cool. And I bet by the time we're done, we'll be about 3 hours, but it's definitely flown by. So here we go.
Yeah.
Picker stood in the alley with the other Bridgeburners trying to figure out what was going on. Soldiers gossiped at possibilities. She called for Blend, who announced herself at Picker's shoulder. She asked Blend to figure out what was going on, but she wasn't too keen on that because she would get noticed, and she really didn't need to. It was plain to see what happened. Picker was surprised at this, and Blend asked if she lost her brain when she gave up her torques. Picker said to keep it up and she'd regret it. Blend said she would explain. She thinks the Grey Swords had some personal business to clear up, which they did, but it nearly ripped up that commander to pieces. She also thought it was Paran's hand who had brought him back from the dead, which she didn't think he had it in him to do. They thought lately he was more than just another noble, and now they had seen the proof. Though that wasn't a bad thing, as he wouldn't stick a sword in their backs. He might actually take one for them. As for Gruntle, he looks like he's just shaking himself awake, and the masked priest of Trake wasn't too thrilled. But no one really cares because sometimes everyone just needs a smile. Picker only grunted. Blend continued, saying now it was time for Humbrol Tower and his Barghast, who held his axe high and was making his way to the Thrall's Gate. Trotz pushed his way through the Bridgeburners to join his kind in meeting their gods. Picker hoped he stayed with them, as he sure as shit couldn't lead. Blend said Paran did, though. Picker agreed. Blend said it might be worth cornering Ansi and anyone else who's been talking too much. Blend agreed. They should corner them and beat them senseless. She said to find Deterin, and they had their own business to clear up.
Yeah, I don't really know if I have any particular thoughts outside of, they're just giving each other shit again. But yeah.
Yeah, and this is what I was talking about before, where I think Ikovian kind of like died for a moment, and they said that Paran brought him back.
Right.
At least, this what it looks like on the outside to the Bridgeburners. Yeah, I don't know. That was about my only thought there. Otherwise, yeah, pretty straightforward. Just kind of maybe a little bit of a recap of what had happened already.
Yeah. Well, do you think that Paran is enacting his Master of the Deck abilities? I mean, he must be, right? Like, if he's able to pull Itkovian back from the dead or whatever vision he was having.
Yeah, he must be to some extent.
So
whether it's to his full abilities or not, I don't know. But
yeah,
it's definitely seems to be doing something.
Right. I would agree. I'm curious to see how it goes from Paran being in pain and looking sick all the time to him accepting his role and what that looks like.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll see some more on that.
But yeah, I don't have any other thoughts.
Me neither. Let's take it away here. Your last shorty here.
Yeah, bring her home, right?
Yes, sir.
Buke circled high overhead. His keen eyes missed nothing. The day was drawing to a close. The Panions were still being driven west by the Barghast. In the city itself, he could see Barghast moving through the streets, clearing the dead. The long, laborious task of clearing the city had begun. The Sparrowhawk heard nothing but the wind, lending the scene below a solemn, ethereal quality. Nonetheless, he drew no closer, for distance was all that kept him sane. In the sky, vast dramas of death and desperation were diminished to something almost manageable. Burned out buildings, tragic ending of innocence, desperation, horror, grief, the storms that destroyed lives. No closer would he get, ever again. There was pain in the gifts of the elder gods, but there was also mercy. Two things. I really feel like this did a great job of drawing this chapter to a close. And I almost kind of feel like this is the end of like this section, like this part. Like, I feel like they've done their job. They've got the Panions out. And from there, who knows what's going to happen, right? I don't think the Panions are done, but I definitely do think that as far as this part in time, it is complete.
It seems that way, at least here.
Right. But I also love this perspective, like you can almost kind of imagine yourself as Buke in a soul taken form, just circling the city and observing everything from an aerial view. I think that also kind of helps accentuate my previous thought about it being a nice conclusion.
Yeah.
The last thing that I have here is he kind of says no closer would he get ever again. And I almost kind of wonder if that means like he's just going to stay a Sparrowhawk for good.
I don't know. I guess I don't think he will. I don't really have any reason to back that up, but I don't think he will.
I also kind of feel like what he talks about with the burned out buildings and the tragic ending of innocence, desperation, horror, grief, the storms of the destroyed lives. I feel like this is him letting go of what happened to him. And therefore, that is the reason why he doesn't want to get any closer. Because up here, it's manageable. Up here, it's not as bad as what it seems. I feel like this is kind of like maybe his way of letting go.
I can get that. And I think, like, to me, I would think, like, if you've got that overhead view, it might not be as up close and personal, but you can see all the destruction, like, better. Like, you got a better view of, you might not see individual bodies, you might not be able to tell how many there are, but you see the destruction on a wider scale.
Right.
So, I mean, to me, I don't know that that's necessarily better, but that's just me.
I mean, that's fair, but you're not seeing the details of how someone was killed. You're not seeing the brutality of that because you're so far away.
Yes. Right. That's true. So I don't know. It's I guess it's a horse apiece, right? I mean,
yeah, essentially, but I guess
not great either way.
No. Where do you think this is going, sir?
I don't know. What I do know is this next chapter is going to be a monster because it's like 60 pages.
Yeah, this is the most we've ever done up to this point. We've never had a 60-page chapter before. We've had 50s, but never 60.
Right, because we're on page 543, and and I think we're going to be
603.
Page, I don't know. It's going to kick our ass, I think. I think we're probably going to touch base with everybody, I would think, which I'm kind of looking forward to. Yeah. I would think in that span, I don't know what the hell we're going to see, but I think we're going to see everybody. It feels weird that we're a little, I don't know. You want to call it 2/3 of the way through the book?
Yeah. I mean, it looks like we've got a little under 400 pages left, about 350 pages left.
So, I mean, it feels like things are pretty well done at Capustan, and I know you and I were talking, just like with the artwork that we saw for the Broken Binding books that are coming out. Like, I don't know how exactly things are going to get to Coral and what's all going to transpire there, but things are. I mean, I feel like it's kind of that artwork kind of spoiled things that way. We're going to Coral at some point. I don't know if we're going to start making our way there. And I don't know what's going to happen there exactly anyways, but I don't know. I think The only thing I can think is that we're just going to see bits of everybody. I'm looking forward to seeing some Lady Envy and Talk and the Segula, or not Talk, Tool. But it will be interesting to see. I think we'll probably get more of Talk and the Matron and the Seer. I don't know if we'll see. I don't know what's going to happen with the Barghast and their gods and the Bones. I don't know if like the Bridgeburners are going to chase the Panions to Coral. I don't know.
Well, I
But
mean,
that's
from looking at the map here at the beginning of the book, Capustan is at the north or the top part of the Panion Domain. And we know based on this chapter that at the very beginning, Tool and Envy and Segula were attacking what I would imagine is Outlook, which is the southernmost point of the Panion Domain. So my guess is they're maybe unwillingly or unknowingly doing like a pincer movement towards Coral. Like the Malazans and the Barghast potentially are going to push their way south, while Envy and her company are going to push their way north and kind of rid the Domain that way.
could be. Oh, Quick Ben. We haven't seen him in a minute. I think we're going to see some Quick Ben.
That would be cool to kind of get kind of his perspective. I mean, I know he's kind of been unconscious because of, I don't even really remember all the stuff with the Barghast spirits potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I will probably, I might try to start reading this chapter tonight. We'll see. Also, if you didn't catch it, those Broken Binding Malazan books, they'll have I think like the pre-sale. I don't know how it'll work, but the pre-sale, I've got it marked on my calendar for July 28th, and that'll be 6 a.m. our time, Central Standard Time. Is like, I don't know if like you can pre-buy them, but then I think the next day they are, I don't know if going live is the right word, but I know like their subscription, people who are subscribed to them are getting first shot, but I think they're going to make a shitload of them. So if you filled out that form, you should get a shot at them. But July 28th is the day to mark on your calendar there.
All right. You should send me, if you can find it, the subscribing link. I know I filled out the Google form, but I don't know if I ever subscribed because I couldn't find out. But maybe I'll look into that. But yeah, I plan on doing a little bit of reading tonight. So
yeah, for sure. I don't know how far I'll get, but I'll take it tomorrow after work. I'll donate plasma and I'll read some more there. I'm sure I won't finish the chapter, but
yeah,
at least get into it. But yeah, I wonder. I mean, depending on how dense this chapter is, I don't know if we'll get to it next week or not. So I guess we'll just have to play it by ear. But it does, again, nothing against HC. It does feel good to get back to Malazan content here pretty much every week. And I guess who knows? Maybe if we got a bunch of Lady Envy in this next chapter, maybe we'll have to see if she wants to come on again and join us for that.
right. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it'll be good to get back into the flow of things. I mean, if we crank it out, we could very well be done with this book in 7 weeks, a little under 2 months.
Yeah, I think it might be a tall task. We'll see. But it is good to. There's part of me that like just dreads these big chapters, but then it's like we're gonna get so much, and we're just covering a big chunk of the book at the same time. So right, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, like, we don't have to be as detailed. I mean, I would imagine that there's probably going to be some things that are going to happen in a 60-page chapter, but I feel like a lot of it is going to be transitional, like it has been in the past. I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, I don't know. That's I think that's all I've got for now, man.
All right, man. Well, another great episode. I'd imagine after it's all done and edited, should be like anywhere from 2 hours and 15 minutes to 2.5.
Yeah. Well, I'll listen to it when you get to it. So anything else you want to throw on for today?
Subscribe to our YouTube channel, y'all. I feel like it's becoming a dying platform for us. Not as many views as there once was. I just don't know if maybe people have switched platforms or what, but you know, eventually we can get to the point where YouTube will be paying us and we can potentially get you a better computer.
True. I know you and I have chatted a little bit about that. Maybe we'll have to do something a little different with that, but yeah, otherwise, yeah, check us out. Yeah, help us out if you could on YouTube. I think we're at like 180 last time I looked, but we're just. I would say I think we're both happy, and just knowing that people are listening to us, and whatever platform you choose, wherever you're at, it's a lot of fun to interact with everybody. We've got friends in Norway, France, all across the United States, India, down in South America. So hit us up. Let us know where you're listening from. I always think that's cool. I kind of wish we had a map. We could put pins in the places where people are at. So send us a tweet, send us an email, send us a message, whatever, wherever, comments on something, and just let us know because, yeah, I'm just fascinated by that. I'm curious to see what kind of reach there is. So I know it's pretty widespread, and it's more than I ever thought was going to be possible.
That's actually a good idea. I could totally whip something up and post it to our Patreon. Just an ongoing map of where listeners are.
Cool. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Cool. Well, I will get started on that sometime soon.
All right. Well, until next time then, I hope you have a good night, man, and we will talk soon.
All right. Later, man.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
DMJ's Epic Quest. DMJ's Epic Quest. DMJ's Epic Quest. CNJ's Epic Quest. CNJ's Epic Quest. CNJ's Epic Quest. CNJ's Epic Quest.